conversations that do grow our country, our province, our communities, and our personal lives. I think that's what you are heading home, you're listening through your phone. I don't know, perhaps you are at home already preparing supper or enjoying your supper, or just relaxing and thinking, you know what, let me tune in into Frank Dialogue and see what's happening in my community. I'd like to welcome you. So I don't know where you're listening from at this hour. It's 8:05 in this beautiful Thursday evening. You are listening from various radio stations. Allow me to welcome you. If you are from Alex FM, listening through the Wireless, Kofifi FM, Teta FM, KFM, Sosha FM, from wherever you're listening to, thank you for joining us. We will have such an insightful conversation, if I may, about the inclusive economy agenda within the Gauteng province. We'll speak to someone that works on this on a daily basis. So prepare yourselves, and I would say also prepare your phone, so that if you have any questions, if you would like to engage, if you'd like to comment and be a part of this conversation, you can obviously do so by calling in and joining us. I'll share those numbers with you a bit later on. For now, I'd like you to immerse yourself in this conversation, and let's just have good, insightful, impactful, change-making, discussions around what's happening in Gauteng. So, with regards to our guest, it's an absolute pleasure for me to introduce to you the Chief Director of Inclusive Economy at the Gauteng Department of Economic Development. My guest joining me, of course, is responsible for facilitating, for promoting, and as well as developing economic growth in the Gauteng city region. This is what he does on a daily basis. As a matter of fact, he was just telling me off air that he comes from a very busy day out in Mfuleni, just to reiterate the commitment that they have towards developing the city. So I welcome on to Frank Dialogue on your radio, Mr. Mathopane Masha. Good evening.
Well, good evening, and good evening to your listeners. Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
It's good to have you here. And it's also good to have you talking about, one of the most important conversations in Gauteng. We know that this province is literally the economic engine of the country. So when Gauteng does well, the rest of South Africa does well. But when Gauteng struggles, you can see the remnants and the ramifications in other parts of the country. Let's first start with understanding what your role is, Mathopane, being responsible for inclusive economic growth within Gauteng.
Well, thank you. So really our role is quite broad. So the word inclusivity means that part of what we do is to design and implement programs that will drive inclusivity. Inclusivity in a sense that as the economy moves in a particular direction, it has to be able to pull all different groups in the community, being it women, be it youth, be it people with disability, be it military veterans, and any other group in society that we categorize as a special group, so that we do not then perpetuate inequality in our countries. We are one of those countries that are heavily unequal in terms of Gini coefficient and the measurements. So it's important, therefore, that any program that we really design or we position for our economy is able to also pull the rest along. Of course, it's not as easy always, but that in a nutshell is part of the design and the intent in terms of the programs that we then package and deliver with the community. Of course, a lot of them will be informed by the community. So part of the engagements, for example, today is to really be able to also understand how and what are the things that needs to happen in community, so that any intervention is informed by community needs.
Yeah. I know that you have a passion for economic research and analysis. When you talk about South Africa being an equal society, an unequal society, or at least having a background and a history of inequality, take us back to those challenges that led to you as the Gauteng province and this particular department seeing a need for a department that focuses solely on inclusive economic growth.
Yeah, so if you look at the sectors that we regard as important sectors in the economy, be it manufacturing, be it ICT, and even the newer ones, and you look at ownership patterns, you still realize that there's still a bit of skewedness. And the reason why in our country previously, historically, there was an introduction of triple DE. The intention was also to try and do what we call redress. So where you see a lot of imbalance in terms of participation in the economy, both in terms of race, but in terms of gender, and. So part of the work that therefore had to happen was to say that our economy is not necessarily, catering for the majority. So in Gauteng, we know that between 70 and 80% of people here live in what we call townships, historical townships. So hence, the province was therefore very deliberate in introducing the township economy as a focus area of intervention, because if you just intervene there, you would have impacted that 70 to 80% as well. But of course, the numbers are changing, but also, if you look at our province, by 1994, somewhere around there, we were at about 7 point something million. So you were just about 15 million. So you can see that the task for us is quite huge. There are things that are pulling a lot of people into the province. Not all of them are skilled, therefore meaning that part of the programs that you then have must also accommodate those, because then you then have unfortunate spillover effects into socio-economic issues in the community. But in the main, I think that becomes the focus as well. But we are also investing in high growth sectors, so that we are able to also continue to really lead. As you can see, I mean, as a province, we contribute just about 34% to the GDP of the country, and even in terms of stats in Africa, I think we're at some stage we're sitting at number 4. Growing at a faster rate, being the bigger economy than some countries. So the responsibility, as you correctly mentioned, the role that the province occupy in our economy, in the country, in the continent, is quite important, and therefore we have to make sure that as we drive that agenda, we also include the rest as well.
I suppose, Mathopane, it's not only about including demographics, but upskilling and reskilling, because my goodness, I mean, this world is turning at such a fast pace. I'm sure even faster than how it used to move 70 years ago. I'm talking here about the undeniable impact of artificial intelligence, for example, and we're seeing how technology is literally taking over sectors. Where are you in ensuring that those that you aim to include, particularly even the youth themselves, are not only included, but they are upskilled so they can meet and catch up with where we are as a globe, as far as globalization is concerned?
I feel that different levels. I mean, as a province, every year I'm sure you would have seen the Premier would launch schools of specialization. So part of that realization is that we need to make sure that we introduce some of these skills at the schools level, and I think a lot of those are doing very well. But also in terms of investment, there's a very strong focus on the technology interventions, our ICT program as well. So we have as a department, as a province, we've got the Innovation Hub, for example, as one of our agencies that invest a lot in research and development to make sure that we develop new skills, new technology. We incubate a lot of businesses there that are, for example, we're beginning to see a lot of interest in drone manufacturing, people looking into as an option, as a career, which is quite interesting as well. But also we're beginning to see, I mean, in our province, and I think it applies pretty much across the country, this definition of this thing called a job has changed. So historically, when you were, well, I'm still young, but I'm sure those that came before me, as they were growing up, a lot of like where I want to work forever, as in from when I get a job until I retire. Teachers and those very noble professions that we've seen in our community, but that has changed. Today, what you have, I mean, when you go to some of the fancy coffee shops around here, you'll find people actually chilling there. You think they're just there for coffee. No, this guy's actually working. There are a lot of new opportunities, jobs like what you call the gig economy. People who are doing a lot of data analytics, editing of data. So when you Google information on the system and you find it correctly packaged, it's not by accident. There are people who are doing those. So So there's a lot of opportunities that are beginning to really shape our landscape in terms of work. Also, young people are no longer interested in working from 8 to 4.
Yeah, yeah. True.
They want to be flexible in terms of how they, and also their focus is more on value. So if I have 1 hour a day that can generate enough money for a day, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things. We're also beginning to see other opportunities that were not necessarily, if you look at our culture, are beginning to, like if you look at this thing of last mile delivery driving. So it took a long time to catch up in our country because, part of the research is that we didn't necessarily have a background in terms of motorcycling and all of that. So you then see a lot of people that will come from other countries taking advantage of those opportunities. But we see a lot of young people now taking up those opportunities, because you need to look at it from the entire e-commerce ecosystem, where you've got products that are produced in Alexander or in Mothotoane. Your market doesn't have to be limited by where you produce it.
Right.
Someone sitting in Limpopo, that beautiful province, can easily just order beads from KZN and they arrive 2 days later. So the market is no longer people in the community and all of that. So the whole economy has completely changed, and as a result, it is therefore important that some of people that have been in this space needs to be upskilled. Yeah. Otherwise, they'll be left behind.
Right.
And also we are beginning to see our economy in Gauteng gradually pushing us into a corner where we're becoming a cashless economy. But what does that mean for other people in the that are our informal traders, people in the taxi industry, and what does that mean? And if you were to introduce solutions, how do you accommodate those? Right. And also, how do you mitigate risk? Because with virtual platforms, there's also cyber security considerations as well, where you may wake up one morning and your Rand is gone.
Absolutely.
You don't know who took it. So those are dynamics that are in the economy, but they are quite exciting because part of our delivery model is that we work through partnerships. A lot of solutions we will go to the community and say, this is what we want to do, what do you think? And we will then collectively build those and nurture those ideas.
Yeah, and I look forward to also hearing what else you're doing in as far as the township economy is concerned. We'll get into that in just a moment. You spoke about the township, and what's happening in as far as our taxis and how they are, of course, billing and how technology is moving, but also young people in these townships. Amongst those other issues that we're seeing there, Mathopane, is the issue around spaza shops and the outcry recently around them being implicated in the deaths of young, innocent, unsuspecting children who may have bought, whether it's a biscuit or a packet of December or sweets, things you and I bought when we were growing up from a spaza shop.
Yes.
But now it seems that they are detrimental to the safety and health of the children. I want to come to you in terms of your understanding of this outcry. I mean, as a province, when you conduct your research, because obviously this affects the township economy in some way or the other, what's your understanding of that phenomenon that's currently happening?
So it's quite an unfortunate situation. And I'm sure part of the question that everyone is asking, but why now? I mean, we've been buying these coppers the same way like the kids are doing now.
Sure.
But all of a sudden it's a problem. I think part of the research that we have is that because of it has to do with also health and safety issues around cleanliness in some of the establishments that we've seen in the township. And we have known and we've seen that where you've got a problem in terms of cleanliness, you also have a problem in terms of rodents and other forms of these unsightly things that seeks to then infiltrate your space. And what we've seen also is that most of these guys, in trying to mitigate or address that, they will then buy some of these dangerous chemicals, Tepaphos or Aripirime as we call it in the townships. And that's where the contamination has happened as well. But also we know that because of the nature of this space, so if you look at a tuck shop, usually if I run a tuck shop, I'll buy a big bag of these coppers or whatever I'm buying. And then I'll try and I'll sort of, repackaged into small packs. And that's where most of the contamination happens. We also have obviously established that there are obviously, some of the factories that may not also be at that level of standards where, so you have then contamination at different levels. Hence, the issue around health inspectors and their role in making sure that we maintain the standard becomes very important. Just to make sure that we obviously are able to inspect, and there are also consequences where, for example, people are found to have. And this applies, of course, as you've seen, the outcry in the community to, shops that are owned by foreigners, but also locals. So issue of cleanliness is important. But we've seen, a lot of those problems would have come from, different other group than locals, as we've seen in the community. But yes, I think there is that contamination. We also know that some of these chemicals that have been diverted into addressing pesticides in our communities would be things that are naturally supposed to be used in farms, and meaning that there's a leakage somewhere in terms of people, because those are controlled substances. So yeah, those are the things that I think, but as a province, of course, as you have seen, every week, every day, we've got different teams doing inspections, and also making sure that we insist on, as we do enforcement, we also educate in some areas, because there are areas where people are generally not aware, and they need assistance as well, so that we can then be able to be at the same level as well.
Yeah.
But it is a problem. It is a problem that we are assisted with, I think, led by the Premier as well. And we also, of course, we engage in different groupings in communities, and so that we also can look at the big manufacturers in terms of how also they handle food as well. So it's not just a problem that is limited to your small tuck shops, even though it's much more amplified at that level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if this phenomenon is entirely new, because I'm sure you are aware that even in past years, community members have raised concerns around the issue of expired food.
Yes.
I think it was also KZN where General Mkhwanazi, as well as the Premier in that province, had done raids in various factories or warehouses where there was evidence of expired foods. Now that we're seeing these inspections conducted by Johannesburg officials, now that the President has proclaimed that spaza shops need to be legally registered within a space of 21 days, currently in effect, how is that going? Is it sufficient time? And is that the solution to this problem?
So it helps, I think, because you mentioned earlier that with the 4IR and technology, we should really be able to track and trace. Where we've seen it during COVID, we're able to track and trace who was the source of what. So it is possible to do that, and I think we need to get to that level. So in terms of the registrations, I think obviously, so there are different levels, right? And I think it's important that these are clarified. So what the current phase in spaza shop or food handling establishments. So your spaza shop, your butcheries, your bakeries, and all of those things. So because we are aware that a lot of those establishments may not necessarily be in compliance. So the registration, it will therefore differ from person to person, because there are people, that already have documentation. It's a small number, but they comply. Your big supermarkets in the townships, a lot of them would have been zoned properly by the municipalities, and they comply with those standards. But we know a lot of the tuck shops, because they mushroomed out of our backyards and our yards, do not necessarily comply. So this is how we foresee it happening, is that within the 21 days, we'll have everybody coming forward and registering. There will be an assessment to say, but okay, so these are guys that are currently in compliance. And as the President announced, that there will then be that funding support that he mentioned, about 500 million. contravention of some of those standards, municipalities will then look at how do we then regularize those. But in most instances, that would be that process of being able to make sure that you are zoned properly. You have a certificate of acceptability where you handle food as a food establishment, but also you are registered properly with CIPC, and all the other basic things that as a business obviously they should be in place. But in this case, I think the focus is mainly on the properties that are owned in the townships and how they comply with legislation as well. And most of the, I think. Most people will obviously say that this thing can be costly, but if you look at the impact now that we've seen of lack of compliance, it's much more costlier for everybody, for everyone, for us to be in a situation where we've got this level of non-compliance. But we also know that a lot of people want to comply. They also need to be educated in terms of what do I need to comply as well, so that we can really get to a point, because I can tell you a lot of the funding schemes that are out there, whether by Department of Small Business around funding township enterprises, you may find that they're not able to fund it because there's those smaller things that people just miss in terms of compliance, and as a result, we then have that misalignment in terms of the intention, but also people being able to access the resources that ideally they should be accessing for their businesses. To grow their businesses.
Just my last question to you before we head over to a break, Mathopane. There was equally, an uproar in our township communities where, even with the efforts or the attempts by government to correct the issue around compliance with our spaza shops, the accusations that there are still South African locals protecting non-compliant, undocumented foreign nationals who operate these spaza shops seems to still be ongoing. So there seems to be those who may be bypassing or still trying to manipulate the process that you are trying to correct.
It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. But also, I suppose, if you are in their shoes, so education is important as well, so that we're able to show people, because we are looking at one side of the whole story. So if I am Gogo Dlamini, somewhere in the township, I own a tuck shop, I'm no longer able to run this thing. I'm likely to rent it out. So what we've been asking, even today in Influence, but we've got a lot of South Africans who are saying, I'm manufacturing juice, detergents, whatever. I just need space to manufacture this thing so I can comply. You can't find space, right? They don't have space, but we have a lot of South Africans still who have space, but they still rent it to foreigners. So the question is why? And I think part of the campaign now is also to be able to say that there are many ways we can still be able to generate the same value when you pretty much reinvest back into our economy. Because yes, the argument around our borders and those issues being porous and people being able to come in, it's one story. But we also, I suppose, as citizens, we should be able to ask ourselves those tough questions around allowing certain people who will come into our backyards, and over time, one morning you wake up, Mpakati is saying there's something wrong in the shop in your yard, and you're not even aware. So there are a lot of those things where we also, as citizens, I think we need to be able to take, and I think we've seen that manifesting at different levels, where people are beginning to say, no, but this can't be happening in our communities. And therefore, if there are those that, given the current law, are able to comply, probably they will then be supported in a particular way or allowed to comply in a particular way. But communities are beginning to also take leadership and in terms of addressing these issues, which is very important, because sometimes without community being able to take a leadership, it's difficult to manage that space as well.
I suppose that's what you mean when we talk of inclusive economy, where the community as well is an active participant. But you know what, there's more to come. We're still with Mathopane Masha from the Gauteng Department of Economic Development. He's more responsible for inclusive economy within the department. But interestingly, what I'm hoping to get from Mathopane when we come back is an understanding of the critical role that he has in enabling the Gauteng Township Township Economic Development Act alongside his partners, those stakeholders that the department will be working alongside. What exactly is the Gauteng Township Economic Development Act, and role players like municipalities? What's at stake here for them? How do they play an equally beneficial role? And what are some of the actual legislative steps, I suppose, that will be taken to assure stability and success? All that and more when we come back. Stay tuned.
Frank Dialogue on your radio with Dr. JJ Tabane. Let's talk frankly.
You are listening to Frank Dialogue on your radio with JJ Tabane, but today, Tumelo Mothotoane is standing in for the good prof. He could not make it, but of course the conversations around what's happening in Gauteng still need to continue. So very much privileged and thankful to be entrusted with this role to have tough conversations that will help build our communities. And as of course my guest Mathopane Masha had mentioned before, we need to have these conversations. We need to all be active participants in growing our provincial economy, making sure that our township economy is blossoming, it's growing, and there's interest even from young people to upskill. So once again, a very good evening to you. The time now is 32 minutes after 8, and if you're listening from Alex FM, Kofifi FM, Teta FM, EK FM, Sosha FM, I welcome you and thank you so much for joining us. Now earlier on I did mention that I would love to hear from you and get more of your comments and questions, so you can definitely dial this number 011 440 1396 011 440 1396. So please, if you have any questions for Mathopane or you would like to add a comment, perhaps you have experience in being a business owner in the township, you know the difficulties it is and that you experience to run an economy, or rather a business in a very tough economy in the township. I'd love to hear from you. You are a customer and you also have a level of experience in terms of what it feels like to consume products and services from the township. Maybe perhaps you have an opinion about what you think government can better do so that they don't work in silos, but engage with you as well as a community member on what solutions would be best fitted for you. So perhaps you can do so. 011 440 1396. Of course, I understand we have our first caller. Good evening. All right, seems like they've just hung up on me there, but if in case that's a mistake, still please call me back. 011 440 1396. Hello, caller. My goodness. So let's try again. 011 440 1396. Do not give up. I really want to hear from you, and thank you, for trying to call in. Do not give up. You can still dial 011 440 1396. In the meantime, though, let's continue with the conversation, and talk about where exactly there are opportunities that we can look at, because we've spoken about some of the tough challenges that are experiencing, at least in our communities, but also we've spoken about the communities having to work together to help resolve these challenges. But Mathopane, I welcome you back into the conversation. I hinted to the Gauteng Township Economic Development Act. Perhaps sensitize us for those who don't know what this long word means. What does it mean and how does it impact me as a township resident?
No, thank you. So it's a provincial act that was developed and passed into law in 2022. But the intention really was just to provide a legal framework for intervening in the townships. So prior to that, of course, we had the township economy revitalization strategy, which also framed some of the progress. But there was a sense that we needed to put some kind of, legislative measures to be able to drive that development. So the focus is really on many things. So if you look at some of what you call catalytic focus areas, so we're saying, and somehow we're beginning to see a lot of that now. We're saying that, I mean, if you look at some of the observations in terms of, let's say, foreign-owned stores, that they collaborate on bulk buying and therefore they leverage on pricing, hence they're able to compete at that level.
Yeah.
So part of what we are saying is that, I mean, we need to be able to look at how do we organize retailers in the township to an extent that they can leverage on their own, bulk buying power and leverage the pricing and all of that, meaning that we will then need certain solutions, including, whether it's warehousing and all of that. But if you look at the township, you really will not have space to set up the warehousing at the level that you see on the side of the freeway.
Right.
So it means then we are saying there are options around technology, virtual technology. We now have virtual warehousing where you're able to buy, people deliver, and all of that. So that is one of the focus areas that we have. But also, what the Act did is also to enable investment in what you call backroom or township real estate. We've seen a lot of people beginning to invest in their backroom in terms of rental, market, and beginning to really earn, obviously additional income as households. Yeah, we've seen it growing a lot in Mamelodi, a bit in Kalfontein, Tembisa, and all of that. So it's one of those that the Act then enables to happen in the townships as well. Also, I mean, the Gauteng Partnership Fund, the Department of Human Settlements, also established what we call Kasi for Real. So where we're looking at, people who have space, want to invest in a residential or even student accommodation around the township. But as you know, South Africa, we've got a huge deficit of student beds. So it's an area, especially around the townships, where people can be able to invest in. We're also investing a lot in working with private sector and government broadband infrastructure. So the types of jobs we spoke about earlier in the new economy, definitely part of the most critical enabler is Wi-Fi connectivity. So we've seen a lot of investment in our townships from private sector, but also government investing in most of our government facilities will have broadband connectivity. People are able to connect, access information, the correct information, and they're able to take decisions around businesses as well. So meaning that also, I mean, if you are in the township, you've got connectivity, you've got stable electricity, you can really work for a global company and be able to do these new jobs that you're talking about, your data labeling, and all of that, and a lot of income as well. So, but also it changes the dynamic around office work. If I'm a researcher, I'm doing research, do I really need a very expensive overheads office somewhere? Right. No, I can. If I have those services, I can be able to work from home. So those are, and obviously in terms of transport and logistics, we are looking at issues around last mile connectivity and the opportunities there. Working with transport as well, the Department of Transport, or looking at how do we unlock opportunities along the value chain in terms of the taxi industry. Because as you can see historically, a lot of especially people that are in that space will just participate at the end of the value chain. But we've seen, I mean, with the big associations, they're investing a lot in business.
Yeah.
So we are encouraged by that, and I think that's part of the impact that we will see as the Act begins to take root as well.
All right.
So those are some of the things I think that I can just mention as well. But we also are focusing on driving impact on what you call high priority sectors as a province, where we're investing a lot of resources in driving technical skills development in our townships. And investing in products. In September, we there's a store called Eden Vine. It's owned by a young woman from Pretoria, where we working with her. We're able to. So part of the work we do, we support also people who develop products.
Okay.
So the cosmetic space is quite big. So she has developed a store where she only sells 100% South African products. And so some of the guys that we have been supporting, obviously, it's one thing to produce a good product, but it's another thing to sell it.
Yes,
market, people must still know it,
Yep.
people must still love it and buy it. So we are also helping in terms of trying to create markets for people who have good products that are tested, of course, that are certified to can be able to be commercialized.
All right. Well, let's take some calls. 011 44 Hello, caller.
Hello.
Can hear you.
Hello.
Can hear you. Welcome.
Hey, Sima.
Now I can hear you. All right. Let's perhaps move on to another call. I'm struggling to hear our caller. Hi, caller. Evening. All right. Seem to have lost our next caller there. 144 trying to establish connection, but please keep trying again. Would love to hear from you. You mentioned the taxis and taxi ranks and how associations are doing all they can in terms of investing in business, but also in recent years we also understand that most taxi operators are still struggling with their finances. The same way that you're assisting with the lady that you placed as an example, who's producing 100% locally manufactured and produced cosmetic products. We're still seeing that assistance again, even in taxis, with regards to finances. There seems to be problems and gaps there. How are you engaging with the taxi industry and the taxi operators and the drivers and the association to resolve this?
So there are different levels there. Of course, our intervention really is at the level of the sector value chain. So the question was that if you look at the activities that are prominent in the township, so the taxi industry, it's pretty much the most prominent one. If you look at the contribution that they're making in the economy and the role that they're playing. So the question was really, how do we, therefore, working with them, of course, identify opportunities that much more value addition, add more value to them as a business, other than just, for example, ferrying clients from point A to B, which is pretty much at the end of the value chain. And so we looked at that, and we then said part of what we need to do is to obviously drive investment into infrastructure and taxi ranks, working with municipalities, and of course other role players, Department of Transport as well, and also create other additional opportunities. So we have seen now a lot of associations doing certain things that establishing fuel depots themselves, and as a result they're leveraging on pricing in terms of fuel, because that's one of the biggest cost driver. We've now beginning to see creating hubs, services hubs where they can change tires, and of course empowering each other along the way. So we're beginning to see a shift in terms of the entrepreneurial spirit that we've always known that the people who are in this industry have as well. But there are still certain gaps that we've had. A lot of the intention in terms of government is to make sure also a lot of the drivers are assisted in terms of access to medical services as well, especially around taxi ranks. So some of those are still gaps that we still see in the industry. But also I think we do have programs that we're implementing with the industry also. But I suppose at the personal level, maybe not necessarily, but what we've done in the last year as part of the Township Act, we also established what you call Township Partnership Fund. And one of the products there focuses on the taxi industry. And of course, a lot of taxi operators have been funded. But the question really, I suppose, the intervention needs to be much more, almost like a wholesale intervention where you look at different levels. The driver, the operator, the value chain in terms of who manufactures, for example, tires, spare parts that goes into, and you then begin to enable those guys to participate in those opportunities. So that's when we will really be happy that the industry, it's really now driven in the townships, local by locals. But we are seeing a lot of associations that are investing a lot in high value, business, whether it's logistics, and depots, as I mentioned. So we are quite encouraged by that, but there's still a lot more that has to be done in that space.
Absolutely. 01144401396. Let's try and take some calls there. Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, Papa.
Oh, yeah. Ke batla ho botsa the speaker on the radio hore the act ele e ngotseng ya parliament hore the small business are reserved for the locals. How come then ba kgona ho register the foreigners ka yona this act ke bona e contradictor because ba batla ba regulator mara ere dispenser shop the saloon the deke tsa dikhoneng like other countries tsetso kontle high state ha ba dumele why South Africa teng ba dumele.
Question, Papa. Thank you so much for that question. Mathopane.
So I think there are different. So if you look at, if you look at our, so you've got people who come to our country, and there's been an argument in the last few weeks on whether the 5 million condition on investment applies to people that are in some of the spaces. And I think that is part of what clarity that has been provided over and over again. But if you look at the asylum permits, it gives or refugees, permits or visas, it gives these guys certain rights, or at least certain rights. One, must be able to access education. You must be able to make a living. And I think part of what the model standard bylaw that has been introduced now, that is going through a process of public participation, is also to try and clarify and reconcile some of the pieces of legislation which, as he correctly says, some of them are complementary. Some, in some instances, depending on what you want to achieve, people may focus on one aspect and not the other. So part of what we wanted to do, obviously, with the model standard bylaw is also to assist to make sure that there's clarity on who can register what, who can do what, and once and for all. But in terms of the issue around, most of the guys who run sponsorship may not necessarily have registered businesses, because what they will do, these guys, they remember you register or you have a permit for your facility as a landlord, as a South African, and you then rent it out. So when we come and we inspect, we find that there's a permit, Masha, but the person who runs this thing is not Masha.
Yeah.
So there are those things that I suppose we also still need to beef up compliance around those and make sure that we can be able to intervene and address those challenges as well. But it's true that there are countries, Botswana being next door here, where they're clear and they will say we are reserving some of these things, whether it's hair salons and all of that, for locals, so that we're able to make sure that we drive those. But we've also seen in some of the sectors that locals in some of them will take longer to take up those opportunities, like in the last mile, the scooter driving. It took longer for South Africans to take up those opportunities. So some it was not by design, it's because there was a gap in the market.
Yeah.
And these guys took advantage, and now we then try and apply the law in retrospect in terms of managing this. But I do think it's a very valid question. Thank you.
Yeah. Also with regards to awareness, because I think this also goes back to information sharing and awareness raising by the department. What efforts are you doing to ensure that the entrepreneurs that perhaps are even facing red tape where they are in the township, the communities, the business owners, and the entire value chain that makes that contributes to the vibrancy of the economy in the township is informed of what needs to be done, where you need to go to access what opportunities, but also what the acts and laws of this country say about those who participate.
Yeah, so that's why we have we have a lot of compliance session at different levels. For example, we've got every Wednesday with Gauteng Treasury, we've got compliance workshops around how people need to, for example, what are the things that they need to take into consideration if they are contracting or applying for opportunities, whether in government or everywhere else. So it talks about compliance and how we assist people to pay attention to these smaller things as well. But also in terms of issues around products, we have in the department our consumer desks. In fact, that's the department that is leading issues around your blades, your visits to check if products are labeled properly and all of that. And we go to a lot of events where we exhibit, where we also do master classes, where we'll just take people through. Because sometimes, also as community members, we also tend to forget that we've got rights around products that we buy. So if you buy a TV, and suddenly a week later this thing has got 2 screens split.
Yeah.
You need to be able to know where to go, what are your rights, and all of that. But also as a province, we also relaunched what we call Ishishini Lako, or Lugisha Khoba, at least. So where we go into different areas in the townships where we basically run awareness workshops in terms of some of the things that need to be in place in terms of registering. We bring other entities as well, whether it's SARS, whether along, so that people who want to also check and verify if they are in compliance, they can do that on the spot. But our approach is really developmental. So we want to also, especially people who have products that may not comply. We do have a program where we assist people. It's quite expensive, so we usually have a lower intake because it's expensive to do things around, product testing, certification, labeling, and all of those things.
Yeah.
But it is a program that we want to grow so that we can then begin, as we address other challenges around food quality, but we also develop products in our community. So it's really quite a comprehensive program around Lugisha Khoba, which looks at all those facets.
All right, let's try and take some more calls. I saw some calls coming in. Every time I try to go back to a call, it seems, then it stops. But please, we are literally 9 minutes to ending our conversation, and I want to include as many, calls as possible. So please try and call in. I suppose also, yesterday I was facilitating the Gauteng Climate Change Indaba conference out in Beachwood, hotel. I suppose the efforts from the Department of Environment in addressing issues of global warming and climate change, getting some outcomes from COP29. And I'm saying this because a tornado had just hit in the West Rand. We've seen still people feeling the consequences of flooding in our country, with the drainage system obviously affecting many households that are not on solid, concrete establishments. Is that an area of concern that you're prioritizing and putting focus in, because it does affect the economy of this province?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of focus on our green economy. We've got a green economy as a focus in the department, in fact. But we are intervening a lot more on the economic part, where, for example, we have a program where we're looking at opportunities around what we call microgrids, where you can look at, for example, a concentration of businesses in a particular area, and you invest in microgrids that will enable either to take them off the grid or reduce their reliance on energy that contributes to negative issues around our carbon footprints and footprint and all of that. So we do have a program, I think, that we're investing. Also, we have seen also a lot of our corporates beginning to invest in energy efficient either building techniques. So part of our focus, of course, as we address also some of those objectives, we're also looking at how do we, in the course of running a business, also begin to infuse some of those objectives. But also we look at opportunities that people begin to take. Also, a lot of the banks now are looking at interventions that will address their their ESG objectives in terms of energy objectives, and how would we then, as you run a business, as you become profitable, but also you look after the environment. And so I think it's a bigger focus of our work. And there are a lot of, I think it will require really a specialized program, because we do have a lot of work that we're doing, investment in that space, that is going to that, where we're looking at other alternatives, including the hydrogen as an alternative, and many other initiatives as well.
Yeah. Also, as we prepare to close, your last closing comments in as far as where to from here. Oftentimes I would hear government or even some local and provincial governments saying we are aiming to have achieved this by 2030. We're aiming to have achieved this by 2050. What is the ultimate target and goal for Gauteng as a province and your department? What exactly is the timeline, and what are your goals that you're hoping to have achieved by then?
Yeah, of course, we've got growing Gauteng 2030. There are a lot of, high investment drive to make sure we drive investment into the priority sectors. I'm sure you have heard MEC speaking recently around partners that are looking at investing into new airports in our province, where we're looking at expanding investment in other areas, including Lanseria, where we begin to see a lot of investment as a smart area where we're looking at technology and other solutions as well. But also in doing so, to make sure that we drive that inclusivity, we create jobs in our community. We also solve this problem with partners. I mean, we've recently issued a call for partnerships where we're clear that we are doing a lot, but a lot that we're doing may not be enough. So we're looking for different solutions that can collectively help us drive growth in our province and make sure that these 15 plus million people are able to access opportunities. They're able to create opportunities themselves in an environment that is conducive for them to grow as well. But I think also we are looking at making sure that we increase the contribution of township economy, also in terms of our GDP in our province, so that we see a lot of investment in products. We increase the capacity of the productive capacity of the township economy, because I think if you look at countries that have similar, demographic makeup, like a lot of new SMMEs that are driving growth come from your townships. So that is what we are really aiming at achieving as a province as well.
Yeah, as you're speaking about the plans that you have as a province, I just wonder, because we are in Alexandra, and I wonder if Mhlomong there is a parent, an elder, or a young person who's saying, Mathopane, I've lived in this township for so long and nothing has changed. It's been decades and decades of hearing promises from government that, change will come. Will I see this change in my lifetime? Seems to be the concern. Will my children see the township, get out of the rot that sometimes, or the decay that it finds itself in? What would your words or a response be to that township resident to say, I've lived here my entire life, I've raised kids and grandkids my entire life, and there seems to be no change. Will I see this change in my lifetime?
Yeah, we believe so. I mean, if you look at the commitments that the current administration has made in turning around and reversing some of those, and also admitting to areas where there are shortfalls and committing to really intervening in making sure that we really can drive value in our community. But also, obviously we are saying that it can't really be government alone driving that. There has to be, partnership with the community to make sure that the interventions are where they are felt the most, and they can then be able to make this change as well. But we also know, I mean, in our country as well, that we still have low levels of entrepreneurship as well. So we also need to be deliberate in who do we support with what, because sometimes you may find that because of my circumstances, I am in business, but I'm not necessarily an entrepreneur. You are then giving me money to invest in my business, and I may not necessarily be able to grow that business because, but there are those. So we need to also be able to work harder, making sure that we make the right choices in terms of who we support, how we support the guys that we need to support, and collectively grow our economy as well.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me, Mathopane.
Thank you for the time.
All right, that is, of course, the Chief Director of Inclusive Economy at the Gauteng Department of Economic Development. It's been an absolute pleasure having him on the program, and we heard a lot just in terms of the plans that the Gauteng province has to grow this province, but also equally admitting that they can't do it alone. They need the communities, they need private sector to come on board. They need the assistance of the municipalities, which really are the middlemen between government and our communities, the closest they need them to be efficient, but they also need, of course, hungry entrepreneurs on the ground who are willing to be active participants and to play quite an active role in initiating, of course, more of this growth with the support of the Gauteng department. But I'd like to thank you for joining us from wherever you were tuning in from, Kofifi FM, Teta FM, EK FM, Alex FM, Sosha FM. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to Frank Dialogue on your radio with Prof. JJ Tabane. Mothotoane. Until next time, God willing, and God bless you, we will meet again. Bye-bye.
Frank Dialogue on your radio with Dr. JJ Tabane. Let's talk frankly.
marang cause trouble.